The American people have got to know whether or not I've got a great park. Well, I've got a great park. I've earned every bird I've got. Howdy, I'm Chandler O'Quinn. Welcome to Chandler's Travels. Today we are back at Richard Nixon Park in York County, Pennsylvania, talking about some of Nixon's connections to the Gettysburg area. Hope you'll enjoy it. Well, any topic of Nixon and Gettysburg has to start here at Gettysburg. I'm at the National Cemetery. Behind me is the marker to the 73rd Ohio. Regiment was organized in 1861, and among them was a man named George Nixon. George spent a lot of his life here in Pennsylvania, but then moved to Ohio in the 1850s. He was married to Margaret Ann Trimmer, and they had 10 children, 3 daughters and 6 sons, I believe, or 7 sons. And he was one of the oldest privates to enlist. He was, I guess, in his late 30s when he enlisted, maybe 39. By July of 1863, the 73rd had fought at Chancellorsville and 2nd Manassas. He was 42 years old. The 73rd's main task was to protect the southern end of Cemetery Hill from the Confederate forces. And so that is where they were in this general vicinity in July 1st, and then getting into July 2nd. Well, we'll pick back up what happened July 2nd in just a minute. So Culp Street was supposed to be a main skirmishing line. The 73rd Ohio were on one end, and along this line, this was sort of no man's land. It's crazy. This is residential homes. I can only imagine the amount of sage that it takes to cleanse these areas and make people at peace. But July 2nd, this was no man's land. And that's where 42-year-old George Nixon found himself. He was hit on the right hip and in the right torso. And then that happened early in the morning on July 2nd, and he just stayed out here. No one could get him for hours and into the night. And it was a German immigrant in his regiment, the bugler, Richard Enderlein, who couldn't take hearing his cries of pain, George Nixon's cries of pain anymore, and went out into the skirmish line in the middle of the night, crawling on his hands and knees to find George Nixon. He was half his age, and brings this 40-year-old man on his back all the way back to the Union lines. George Nixon would succumb to his wounds on the 10th or 14th of July, and we'll talk a little bit more about what happened to Richard Enderlein and the Nixon family in just a moment. I'm at the gravesite of George Nixon. So Nixon succumbed to his wounds July 14th of 1863. One of his sons, Samuel, was 15 years old. About 12 years later, he would have a son of his own, Francis Nixon, otherwise known as Frank. Frank would move from Ohio to Southern California, to Whittier. He married a Quaker named Hannah, and they decided to name their children after English kings. I believe it's their second or third son that they named Richard. Richard Nixon would come here often to pay his respects to his great-grandfather. As far as I'm aware, and the research that I've done, Richard Nixon is the only president right now who is a direct descendant of someone who fought and died at Gettysburg. That was something that was uniquely known to Nixon. Dwight Eisenhower, living here in Gettysburg, Nixon would come and consult with Eisenhower both during the presidency and after. And many times he would come and lay a wreath or lay flowers and pay respects to George Nixon of the 73rd Ohio.
Immediately following his bold rescue of George Nixon, Richard Enderlin was promoted to sergeant. He served out the remainder of the war, and then, nearly 30 years later, he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions at Gettysburg. He was presented this honor by the president, another Ohio Civil War veteran, William McKinley. His citation read, "The President of the United States of America, in the name of Congress, takes pleasure in presenting the Medal of Honor to musician Richard Enderlin, United States Army, for extraordinary heroism from the 1st to 3rd July 1863, while serving with Company B, 73rd Ohio Infantry, in action at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Musician Enderlin voluntarily took a rifle and served as a soldier in the ranks during the first and second days of the battle. Voluntarily and at his own imminent peril went into the enemy's lines at night and, under a sharp fire, rescued a wounded comrade." Another interesting connection between Richard Nixon and the Gettysburg area lies in York County, Pennsylvania. There you can find one of the only public parks still named in honor of the 37th president. Richard M. Nixon County Park has several trails and a nature center. Let's take a look inside and see what you can find in there.
Look at my park. Isn't it neat? Wouldn't you think my collection's complete? Wouldn't you think I'm a dick? A dick who has everything. Thank you. I'm here all night. That's what I thought of when I saw the interior of the Richard Nixon Nature Center in York County, Pennsylvania. It's a little rainy here, but we're not going to let that stop us from taking a quiet walk. This is the Quiet Walk Trail. Again, I think Nixon would love this. I enjoy a quiet walk every now and then. So, how do we have Richard Nixon Park in York County, Pennsylvania? How do we still have it? A lot of that has to do with Bob Hoffman. So Bob Hoffman was a local millionaire. He made his fortune in weightlifting. He made a weightlifting magazine. He was involved in some of the first kind of like protein supplements. It was actually very controversial. And through, I believe, the connections that Nixon developed here when his parents lived here while he was starting out in Congress, the two knew each other. Hoffman was a donor to the campaign, and I believe December 1968, Hoffman sets aside all this acreage to become Richard Nixon Park for the newly elected 37th President of the United States. It says that on every plaque. I think to make sure that people understand that it was 1968. Nobody knew what was going to happen in the lead up to his resignation, but it's still here, and it's still named Richard Nixon Park. I saw one article saying that Nixon did come back here in the 80s, and there was some other person here who they put his name on a gymnasium or a basketball court or something. And Nixon was always a guy who liked to chat about sports. I think maybe he was somewhat, maybe even, he was maybe too self-aware that he was perceived as being a man of the common man, that you're going to hear a lot of huffing and puffing. This is much more of an incline than I was expecting. But Nixon wanted that he was supposed to be a man of the common man, but really he was a very intellectual person. So he used sports to try and bridge that gap. And so, well, here's a gentleman who's got his name on a gymnasium. What'd you do? You play football, basketball? Said, no, I did it through community organizing because I helped raise the funds for it. That's why they put my name on it. And very good. That turned a little bit more into Churchill there. Oh boy. Upsy daisy. But, the Nature Center. So cool. You know what? I think Nixon would love that place. Filled with taxidermied animals. More taxidermied animals than a Bass Pro Shop. It is wall to wall. Dead antelope and deer from all over the world. They have real buffalo, they have fake buffalo, they have bison, they have polar bear, grizzly bear, lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my. Oh. And then they have real animals, native animals to York County. They have some snakes that are hopefully staying in their cages. Kids loved it. I was in there. I guess it's a perfect place to go on a rainy day. Wall to wall, kids. Just having a blast. They have touch tables where you can feel the fur, feel the antlers, feel the feathers. I think if he was around to see his park, he'd love the place, and he'd love to see all the kids out there having a good time. Well, I'll check back in with you just a minute. Gotta catch my breath. So I think by the time you get to the resignation in 74, they had already put so much into the park, and there were lots of other places and streets and highways all over the country that had been named for Nixon by then that lost their name. But I think because Hoffman was still such an influential person in the area, and he deeded this land specifically so that it could be named Richard Nixon Park, the name stuck, and now it's 50 years later. I've seen some things in researching this place of people, we need to change that name now. I don't know. I think that there aren't a whole lot of people around who are still angry about it, necessarily. Hey, I'm sure I might get some flack in the comments, but it just seems in the political milieu that we lovingly embrace today, the stuff that happened in Watergate is a cakewalk. So, I don't know. Then again, there's things that happened 150, 200 years ago, and their names are getting stripped off of parks and statues and squares and circles. So, it's very possible that at some point this could no longer be officially Richard Nixon Park, but it'll always be Richard Nixon Park in my heart. Well, that concludes this portion of Nixon's connections to Gettysburg, the Gettysburg area. I think we're going to have one more episode talking about the Nixon connections to the area. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, tell a friend. All of that helps us in growing the channel so I can take even more of you along with me on my journeys. Until next time, vaya con Dios.